March 2018. A luxury hotel suite in London. Hidden cameras capture a man in a pinstripe suit leaning across a mahogany coffee table, speaking in hushed tones about how to destroy political opponents. He mentions Ukrainian girls. He mentions honey traps. He mentions planting stories that spread like viruses. He does not know he is being filmed. He does not know his words will end his company. The man is Alexander Nix, CEO of Cambridge Analytica, and he is explaining how to steal an election. 87 million people had already given him the tools to do it. Cambridge Analytica operated from a glass-walled office in Mayfair, one of the most expensive neighborhoods in London. The building looked like any other consulting firm. Clean, corporate, forgettable. But inside, young data scientists in hoodies worked alongside former military intelligence officers in tailored suits. On the whiteboards, they mapped human psychology like battlefield terrain. The OCE model dominated the walls. Openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, neuroticism. 5 dimensions of personality, 5 levers to pull, 5 ways to manipulate a voter without them ever knowing they had been touched. The company was funded by Robert Mercer, a reclusive billionaire who had made his fortune building algorithmic trading systems at Renaissance Technologies. Mercer rarely spoke in public. He donated to conservative causes with mechanical efficiency. He saw in Cambridge Analytica what he had seen in the stock market, a system that could be decoded, predicted, and exploited. The firm's board included Steve Bannon, then running Breitbart News, who understood that data was not about understanding voters. It was about controlling them. The weapon they built required ammunition. That ammunition came from Facebook. Summer 2014. A researcher named Alexander Kogan created a Facebook application called This Is Your Digital Life. The app presented itself as a personality quiz. Users logged in with their Facebook accounts, answered a series of questions, and received a psychological profile in return. The quiz was free. The cost was hidden in the permission screen that nobody read. Facebook's application programming interface in 2014 contained a design flaw so catastrophic it functioned as a backdoor into the private lives of hundreds of millions of people. When a user authorized an app, that app could access not just the user's data, but the data of every person in their friend network. The friends did not consent. The friends did not know. The friends simply existed in a database that Kogan was now authorized to harvest. 270,000 people took Kogan's quiz. Each of those users had, on average, several hundred Facebook friends. The math was exponential. Within months, Kogan had extracted detailed profiles on 87 million people, names, locations, likes, political affiliations, religious beliefs, relationship statuses, photos, private messages in some cases. Everything Facebook knew about them, Kogan now knew. Everything Kogan knew, Cambridge Analytica would soon own. The data transfer happened in the shadows. Kogan's company Global Science Research passed the harvested profiles to Cambridge Analytica under the guise of academic research. Facebook's terms of service prohibited selling user data to third parties. Kogan sold it anyway. Facebook's enforcement mechanisms consisted of trusting developers to follow the rules. Kogan did not follow the rules. The vault was not just unlocked, the vault had never existed. Cambridge Analytica fed the data into machine learning models designed to classify every American voter by psychological profile. The models did not guess, they calculated. They could predict with startling accuracy whether a person was neurotic or stable, open-minded or closed, agreeable or combative. They assembled up to 5,000 data points on each individual. They knew what you bought. They knew what you feared. They knew what made you angry. They knew which buttons to push and exactly how hard to push them. The targeting worked like this. A voter classified as high in neuroticism would receive advertisements emphasizing threat, images of crime, statistics about violence, stories about immigrants, about terrorism, about the world falling apart. The message was always the same. Be afraid. A voter classified as high in conscientiousness would receive advertisements emphasizing duty, patriotic imagery, appeals to tradition, stories about law and order, about protecting what matters, about standing firm against chaos. The same candidate could be sold to different voters in completely different ways. The voters never saw each other's ads. They never knew they were receiving personalized, psychological manipulation. They thought they were seeing the news. The 2016 American presidential election was the proving ground. The Trump campaign hired Cambridge Analytica in the summer of that year. The company embedded its staff directly into campaign headquarters. They sat alongside the digital team, providing voter profiles and targeting recommendations. They tested thousands of advertisement variations, measuring which emotional triggers produced the highest engagement. They identified persuadable voters in swing states with unprecedented precision. They found people who might vote but probably wouldn't. They found people who leaned one way but could be pushed another. They found the pressure points of American democracy and pressed. The campaign spent millions on Facebook advertising. The advertisements were designed using data stolen from 87 million people without their knowledge or consent. Facebook collected the advertising revenue. Facebook knew where the data came from. Facebook said nothing. December 11, 2015. The Guardian published a story revealing that Ted Cruz's presidential campaign had hired a firm called Cambridge Analytica, which claimed to have psychological profiles on millions of American voters. The story mentioned data harvested from Facebook. A reporter contacted Facebook for comment. Facebook investigated. They discovered that Kogan had violated platform policies by transferring user data to a third party. They discovered that Cambridge Analytica was using data they had no right to possess. They discovered that 87 million of their users had been compromised. Facebook's response was a legal letter sent to Cambridge Analytica requesting that they confirm in writing that all improperly obtained data had been deleted. Cambridge Analytica checked the box. Facebook accepted the certification. They did not audit the company's servers. They did not verify that the data had been destroyed. They did not notify the 87 million users whose information had been stolen. They did not inform regulators. They did not issue a press release. They buried the story under a pile of legal paperwork and moved on. The decision was made in the glass offices of Facebook headquarters in Menlo Park. Mark Zuckerberg was briefed. Sheryl Sandberg was briefed. The company's lawyers assessed the options. They could disclose the breach and face a public relations disaster. They could stay silent and hope the problem went away. They chose silence. They chose growth over transparency. They chose their stock price over their users. The data remained in Cambridge Analytica's possession. The 2016 election proceeded on schedule. For 2 years, the secret held. Cambridge Analytica pitched new clients using the same data. They worked on elections in multiple countries. They refined their psychological warfare techniques. They bragged to potential customers about their capabilities. Alexander Nix gave presentations showing how they could manipulate voters by exploiting their deepest fears. He spoke about it openly, confidently, as if it were simply good marketing. Then Christopher Wiley started talking. Wiley had been there at the beginning. He was Cambridge Analytica's first employee, hired as research director when he was just 24 years old. He had pink hair and a nose ring. He wore oversized sweaters. He looked like a hacker from a cyberpunk novel, not a political operative. He had helped build the psychological profiling system. He had watched the data flow in from Facebook. He had seen what the company planned to do with it. And eventually, he could not live with what he had created. Wiley spent months in secret meetings with journalists from The Guardian and The New York Times. He provided internal documents. He provided emails. He provided the receipts that prove Cambridge Analytica had lied about deleting the data. He explained the technical architecture of the operation. He mapped the connections between Kogan, Cambridge Analytica, Facebook, and the Trump campaign. He built the case that would detonate like a bomb. March 17, 2018, 8 a.m. Greenwich Mean Time. The Observer and the New York Times published simultaneous investigations. Wiley's face appeared on front pages around the world. The pink hair, the nose ring, the exhausted eyes of someone who had been carrying a secret for too long. He described what Cambridge Analytica had done in terms that made the violation visceral. "We exploited Facebook to harvest millions of people's profiles," he said, "and built models to exploit what we knew about them and target their inner demons." Facebook's stock price began falling within minutes. The decline accelerated through the morning. By the end of the week, the company had lost $134 billion in market value. That loss was larger than the entire value of McDonald's at the time. Shareholders panicked. Advertisers paused their campaigns. The hashtag #delete Facebook trended globally. Users who had never thought about data privacy suddenly understood the price of free services. Mark Zuckerberg disappeared. For 5 days, the CEO of the world's largest social network said nothing. His communications team issued carefully worded statements that accepted no responsibility. Mistakes were made. Trust was broken. But by whom? Not by Facebook, not by Zuckerberg, by bad actors who had abused the platform. The passive voice did heavy lifting. While Zuckerberg hid, Channel 4 News was preparing the kill shot. Their undercover investigation team had spent months posing as potential clients for Cambridge Analytica. They had recorded Alexander Nix and other executives describing their methods in granular detail. They had captured Nix on hidden camera explaining how to entrap political opponents with bribes and sex workers. They had filmed him boasting about spreading propaganda that could never be traced back to its source. They had documented a company that viewed democracy as a product to be hacked. The footage aired on March 19, 2018. Nix appeared on screen in that expensive suit, speaking in that upper-class British accent, casually describing electoral manipulation as if he were discussing a wine pairing. "It sounds a dreadful thing to say," he told the undercover reporters, "but these are things that don't necessarily need to be true as long as they're believed." He explained how Cambridge Analytica planted stories in the information ecosystem. "We just put information into the bloodstream of the Internet," he said, "and then watch it grow, give it a little push every now and again." He did not know he was ending his own career. He did not know he was ending his own company. Cambridge Analytica suspended Nix the day after the broadcast. Within weeks, the company announced it was shutting down entirely. The reputational damage was too severe. The clients had evaporated. The business model, which depended on secrecy, could not survive in the spotlight. The firm filed for bankruptcy on May 1, 2018. The offices in London and New York were searched by investigators. The servers were seized. The whiteboards with their OZine models were photographed as evidence. Zuckerberg finally testified before Congress on April 10, 2018. He wore a suit instead of his trademark gray T-shirt. He had been coached by lawyers and crisis communication specialists. He sat in front of 44 senators, flanked by cameras, facing questions from politicians who largely did not understand the technology they were supposed to regulate. The hearing revealed the chasm between Washington and Silicon Valley. Senator Orrin Hatch asked how Facebook made money if users did not pay. "Senator, we run ads," Zuckerberg replied, suppressing a smirk that was captured by every camera in the room. Senator Lindsey Graham asked if Facebook was a monopoly. Zuckerberg said it didn't feel like one. The senators asked about data policies they had never read. Zuckerberg answered in the language of terms of service they would never understand. Nothing of substance emerged from the testimony. No new regulations were proposed. No criminal referrals were made. Zuckerberg returned to California. The stock price recovered. The advertising machine continued to run. The regulatory response came slowly, then arrived with a number designed to generate headlines rather than change behavior. The Federal Trade Commission investigated Facebook for 18 months. In July 2019, they announced the settlement, $5 billion, the largest privacy fine in history. The number sounded enormous. It was approximately 1 month of Facebook's revenue. The company's stock price rose after the announcement because investors had expected worse. The fine came with requirements for increased oversight, but no executives faced personal consequences. Zuckerberg remained CEO. Sandberg remained CEO. The board remained unchanged. The company that had enabled the theft of 87 million user profiles paid a fee and moved on. The individuals involved faced minimal accountability. Alexander Kogan was banned from Facebook. He continued his academic career. He claimed he was a scapegoat, a scientist who had simply used the tools the platform provided. He was not entirely wrong. Facebook had built the system that allowed the data to be harvested. Kogan had merely walked through the door they left open. Alexander Nix was banned from serving as a company director in the United Kingdom for 7 years. He faced no criminal charges. He gave occasional interviews in which he insisted Cambridge Analytica had done nothing wrong. He expressed no remorse. He seemed genuinely confused about why anyone was upset. Cambridge Analytica's parent company, SEL Group, dissolved. Its executives scattered to new ventures. Some of them started new data firms under different names. The talent and techniques that had been developed to manipulate elections did not disappear. They migrated to new hosts. The 87 million users whose data had been stolen received a notification in their Facebook feeds. The notification informed them that their information might have been improperly shared. It included a link to a Help Center article. It did not apologize. It did not explain what had been done with their data. It did not offer compensation. Most users ignored it. Those who clicked learned almost nothing. The deeper question of whether Cambridge Analytica's targeting actually worked remains contested. The company claimed credit for Trump's victory. Former employees said the capabilities were exaggerated. Academic researchers argued that psychographic targeting was not as effective as traditional demographics. The truth probably lies somewhere in the middle. The models were imperfect, the predictions were probabilistic, but the intent was clear. A private company, funded by a billionaire with a political agenda, had stolen the personal data of 87 million citizens and used it to try to manipulate their votes. Whether they succeeded matters less than whether they should have been allowed to try. The scandal accelerated privacy regulation worldwide. The European Union's General Data Protection Regulation went into effect in May 2018, giving users new rights over their personal information. California passed its own Consumer Privacy Act later that year. Companies were suddenly required to disclose what data they collected and how they used it. The era of unlimited harvesting without consent was ending, at least on paper. Facebook renamed itself Meta in 2021. The rebranding was an attempt to escape the stigma attached to the original name. Zuckerberg talked about virtual reality in the metaverse. He did not talk about Cambridge Analytica. He did not talk about the 87 million. The new name was supposed to signal a new chapter. The underlying business model remained exactly the same. The architecture that enabled the scandal still exists in modified form. Today's social platforms collect more data than Cambridge Analytica ever accessed. Location tracking, biometric information, voice recordings, browsing history across the entire web. The techniques that seemed shocking in 2018 are now standard practice. The targeting has become more sophisticated. The manipulation has become more subtle. The users have become more numb. 87 million people took a quiz about their personality. They thought they were learning about themselves. They were training the algorithms that would be used against them. They gave away their data and the data of everyone they knew. They unlocked not just their own houses, but every house on their street, in their neighborhood, in their city. The master key was a checkbox that said allow. The data is still out there. No one has ever verified that all copies were destroyed. Cambridge Analytica is gone, but the information it harvested could be sitting on a hard drive in a warehouse, waiting for the next operation. The techniques the company developed have been studied, replicated, and improved. The next Cambridge Analytica will not make the same mistakes. It will not brag to undercover reporters. It will not leave a paper trail. It will operate in the shadows where the data harvesting never stopped. 270,000 people clicked a button. 87 million people paid the price. $5 billion changed hands. 0 executives went to prison. The platform that enabled the theft is now worth over $1 trillion. The democracy that was targeted has not recovered. The lesson is not that one company did something wrong. The lesson is that the entire system was designed to make this inevitable. When the product is free, you are the product. When the data flows without friction, it flows to whoever wants it most. When the fines are smaller than the profits, the fines become a cost of doing business. Cambridge Analytica is dead. The playbook it wrote is still in use. The next election is already being targeted. The next psychological profile is already being built. The next quiz is already waiting for you to click Allow.